Just make sure that's on and working. Good morning, everybody. So I was able to say good morning to most of you as you were trickling in. Those who've just joined us, good morning and welcome. We are going to get started today on SeeSaw is our session today. And hopefully what you'll find, I know some of you were a little confused about the scheduling change with this SeeSaw session, but hopefully what you'll find is today's two sessions, if you plan on joining us for the next one, are really going to address some of those questions about why we might integrate some of the G Suite applications or G Suite tools into our SeeSaw platform. And our second session is really going to build out some of the, I guess, extra special or more engaging interactive things that we can do with G Suite applications that it might tip you over in that world a little bit of wanting to use some of those applications with your SeeSaw. Now I will say just a little introduction. I was never an early learning teacher. So as a teacher, I never used SeeSaw in practice. I came to SeeSaw as a trainer. But I have to say, SeeSaw is one of a handful of applications, a handful of those like rare technology platforms that actually made me want to go back and teach early learners or young learners because the tool, the platform is so transformative. So I am a believer in SeeSaw 100%. I think it's an extraordinary tool for engagement. I think a lot of the things that we spoke about yesterday are folded into the SeeSaw platform just organically. So, you don't have to overthink it with SeeSaw. You can be very simple and still meet a lot of those student needs. One of my passion areas is accessibility and universal design for learning. And I just love how SeeSaw builds in multiple means of representation, first of all, so how we're delivering content to students in multiple modes, but also offering them multiple means to demonstrate their knowledge and comprehension. So they have all those options available to them, and they're so simple to use. So I'm just a huge believer. I love it so much, but I'm a Google girl at heart. So I will talk and speak to some of the G Suite applications that I think really complement SeeSaw, especially as you get into third and fourth grade and your students are starting to make the transition to G Suite. We want to start introducing some of those functions and features that they're going to need to become more familiar with. So hopefully you know me by now. But if you weren't on yesterday, my name is Allison Ambroso, and I am the Boxlight EOS Manager of Learning and Innovation. And you are welcome to contact me, send me a quick email if you have any questions throughout this week of any of the things that I've said in any of these trainings, or you're looking for more resources, feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm here to support you this week and beyond. So please feel free just to reach out to me directly. Okay, so my objectives for today, and I was saying as people were coming in and joining the meeting, that I'm hoping that this session and the next session are a little bit less of me talking and a little bit more of us sharing collaboratively our ideas, our thoughts, some of the experiences that you've had with SeeSaw now because you've started using it already, and some of the things that worked and didn't work for you. But we are going to look at some of the important settings when you're setting up your SeeSaw for remote learning specifically. And I know that you have a school license for SeeSaw. So if anything I say is not in tune with how your administration has set up SeeSaw, please interject. I don't want to confuse. I'm not familiar with how how SeeSaw has been set up on the administration side. I think I know most of the things, but if I say something and you say that's not how we do it, please just interrupt me or correct me. I would love that. I don't want to confuse anyone, okay? So we're also going to look at creating a remote learning plan with SeeSaw and really thinking about how we can leverage the benefits of home-based learning rather than looking at it as a weakness or a deficit. So I want us to be thinking and approaching this training in a strengths-based mindset. So there are some really powerful things available to us when it comes to home-based learning, as well as using this technology. But I want to think about all of those really neat aspects of students being at home and how we can actually leverage that with our SeeSaw activities and how we're designing those activities. So our third objective is designing remote learning experiences. And that kind of goes hand in hand with creating the plan, but really thinking about those experiences that you are molding and facilitating for your students. And then we'll take some time and look at integrating Google applications into SeeSaw and some of the reasons why you might start integrating and how you might start integrating some of those Google applications. So before we start, I just wanted to talk. I'm going to turn off my video because, as I said yesterday, I have a lot of screens and a lot of tabs, and I want to make sure I'm focused on giving you all the resources and links. I'll be providing a lot of links in our chat box today for resources that you can pull from. Just click on them and bookmark them. You can come back to them later. That's also true for our next session. So all of the resources that I give you today, if you don't grasp them today, don't worry, because I'll add them to that Google site that you'll get at the end of the week as well. So I'm going to turn off my video so I can focus here. All right, so probably if you've been using SeeSaw for a while, you've seen this learning loop. Just want to bring that back because SeeSaw really does a great job of creating a powerful learning loop that brings teachers, students, and families together to work together to really deepen student learning. So there is definitely that element with SeeSaw that was built into it before all of this remote learning switch happened, that relied heavily, or maybe not relied heavily, but really opened the pathways to involve families in our students' learning. And I just love that because I can't think of another platform that does that so deeply and so seamlessly. So just wanted to kind of bring that back. And, SeeSaw believes that families are integral to the success of young learners using this platform. So I really just like that they've prioritized that element of the platform and the use of the platform. So let's start, just like we did yesterday, with a question that's not necessarily directly related to SeeSaw, but gets us thinking about what are some of the differences, or yeah, how did I word this? What are some of the ways learning from home are different than learning within the traditional classroom? So I'll give you a few moments to think about that. And again, try and approach it from that strengths-based mindset. What are some of the benefits of home-based learning that we don't necessarily have in a traditional classroom? So I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and put your thoughts down in chat. You don't have to write a whole thesis statement, just, single words or short phrases would be fine. And I just want to give you a second to think about that. Okay, some responses coming in. One-on-one for students. Definitely, Tracy. So we are providing material for students that are one-to-one. With SeeSaw, that's especially true. Accessibility, absolutely. There's a lot that goes into accessibility and remote learning for students, but in fact, there are so many things that technology affords us in terms of accessibility and differentiation that we don't have in a regular, let's say, paper-based classroom. So I'm a big accessibility nerd, and I'm glad that was the second comment. So yay. Breaks for students as needed. Absolutely. So one of the things that we really need to kind of wrap our heads around and just accept as teachers in this remote learning environment is the remote learning day is not going to look the same as a regular traditional classroom day. And we need to build in those breaks for students. We need to actually give them purposeful and mindful things to do with that break time, so it is, I guess, guided, and they do have a sense of, I'm doing this for a purpose, even for the breaks. Flexibility, for sure, like flexibility in every sense of the word, right? It's not just flexibility of how they're working through instructional material, also where physically they're working through it, how they're sitting, how they're lying down. They might be in bed, they might have a desk in front of them, like they might be under the kitchen table, who knows? So flexibility on all accounts. Immediate correction of mistakes if working one-on-one. This is really important too. So with our technology platforms, we can really provide, if we're on top of it, we can provide immediate feedback, and that feedback loop is not only real, but it can be much more timely than, if we're waiting to get something submitted and then it sits in a pile of grading and you don't look at it, and it doesn't come back to the student for 1 or 2 days. The feedback loop can be much quicker in the virtual environment. Parents read with children more. Absolutely. So one of the conventions that we talk about with high quality remote learning, especially for younger students, is how we can facilitate or involve families in the student learning process. And of course, parents are going to hopefully take initiative and read with their children or conduct whatever other activities, learning activities with their children. But we also know parents aren't teachers. They aren't always teachers. Sometimes they are, and we were just talking about how that can be good or a bad thing, but but parents aren't always teachers. So providing parents with some direction of how they can support their children in learning is really valuable too. Yes, students have the option to build a school day to their strengths in terms of time and energy. I love that about it, because we know students don't always work the same. They don't always have the same energy flow or energy schedule. And they might prefer to do math first thing in the morning, or they might prefer to do art first thing in the morning when they're feeling more creative. Having the flexibility of when they work on things can be a really powerful tool. Empowers independent learning without peer pressure. Absolutely. And Maria, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in terms of SeeSaw and some of the settings that we want to make sure that we're managing, especially in the early days, to ensure that our young learners are not distracted by what other students are doing. Less distractions at home because of one-on-one. Ooh, I think that could go either way. I like your strengths-based mindset of less distractions, but you could also look at the other side of it where, there could be more distractions, but hopefully there are less distractions, or they have a space that they can go that is quiet and easy to focus. And learn at their own pace, independent learning, absolutely. And we can be responsive to that and really easily differentiate. Great, guys. So I think you've all been thinking about this a little bit, this whole remote learning thing, it seems. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to start with our first objective, which is how are we going to set up our SeeSaw classes for remote learning? And before I launch in, I just want to make sure all of you on our meeting today, has everyone set up your SeeSaw classes? That's question number one. And question number two, have you added students? So go ahead and put a Y for yes to both of those, or a Y no. For yes to I've set up classes, but I haven't added students. So just want to quick poll and make sure everybody knows how to set up classes and add students. Okay, but not students because you don't have your class rosters, or not students because you're unsure of how to. Okay, not current students. Okay, but you know how to do that. You know the process of adding students because you did it in 1920. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, great. Good, because I didn't want to make this such a like nuts and bolts SeeSaw training. I really wanted to look at bigger picture, because SeeSaw has a lot of great training material out there. If you're looking for really specific questions to be answered, you can access their training portal, and they have great quick tutorials of how you can do specific things. So let's focus more on some of the important things for remote learning. Okay, one of the settings that I would suggest to start with is we may want to consider not allowing students to view each other's work. And this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where at the beginning, when you're, especially for students who haven't used SeeSaw in the past, you're scaffolding not only their ability to create within SeeSaw, you're also scaffolding, you know, all the skills that they're doing, right? You're building the actual reading comprehension and vocabulary and fluency. But we are scaffolding their ability to be creative and to use the tool in a creative sense. And we really don't want to cloud that process by exposing them to what all their peers are doing right away, especially in the creation part of the process, meaning that once all of the students have submitted or turned in their responses, showing all the students what each other have done at that point, go for it. I think that's a great way to kind of showcase student work and do kind of a show and tell. But in the creation process, I would recommend, in especially the early days as they're getting comfortable with the different skills, that we don't expose them to each other's work. And there's another reason for that. If you're having students use class codes, we don't want them to make the mistake of signing in as another student, which can happen if they're just using class codes. So I'm going to go ahead and show you where to find those settings. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, make sure you're signed in to your SeeSaw account as we're going through this, because we're going to do some activities together. Okay. So all of your SeeSaw settings, I don't know why SeeSaw used the wrench and not the gear, the universal sign for settings, but in SeeSaw it's a wrench. If you click on the wrench, you'll find all of the different settings that you may want to change. So the one that I was showing on the screen is right here. Students can see each other's work. You can toggle on and then confirm change, but I'm going to keep it off for now. But of course, you can always come back and change that setting. So once your students are comfortable, they know how to add audio, they know how to add video, they're doing some creative things on their own, then you might want to have them see each other's work and comment on each other's work. But I would recommend in the beginning leaving that setting off. Okay, so the next one, and this is where I'd love to hear from you. If you're using this to get students signed into SeeSaw, or if you're using a different mode. So for students who do not have an email address or a passport, or not a passport, a password, don't need a passport for SeeSaw. So if they don't have an email address or a password to sign in with, generally the best practice is to use class codes. Now, when we went to home learning, SeeSaw came up with a really quick troubleshoot and workaround for the issue of students signing in from home using class codes, because class codes are for the whole class, right? They came up with home learning codes, and home learning codes are safe, secure, individual codes for students to use at home. And they can sign in again and again and again with the same home learning code. And I believe each student can have up to 50, I want to say 50 home learning codes attached to their name. So if you need to keep resetting them and sending them a new home learning code, you can do that. So just a quick question in the chat. Have you used home learning codes in the past? Is that how you're getting students into or to sign into SeeSaw? Yes, okay, beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so you have a couple options with your home learning codes. You can print them, and printing them will give you an actual PDF. I can show you what it looks like. But you would then have to go and sort of chop up the PDF and remove it so it's page by page so you can distribute it to students that way. But we can also download the codes. This comes in a CSV file, which is basically a spreadsheet. So you can then send each individual code to students' parents by text message, if that's how you're communicating, or by email, if that's how you're communicating. I would recommend email, and then you can have pretty clear directions of how they're going to help their students sign in. Barbara says, I have to update codes from last year and transfer to new classes grade. Someone should want to do this for me, I think. I think so too. One of the big differences between, as I mentioned, between home learning codes and class learning codes is our home learning codes are individual. They're unique to each student, which avoids those login mistakes. If students log in with a class code, they can select and log in as the wrong student or student profile. So by default, it actually prevents students from getting into each other's accounts and seeing each other's work. So the last thing I'll say about home learning codes is you need to generate them or download them from a computer. It will not work on the mobile app. So this is kind of an important troubleshooting point if you've tried to do that before. Okay, any questions about how we distribute those home learning codes? How have you sent them in the past, or how have you communicated those codes with parents in the past? Sent PDF, good. Okay, perfect. So this is a great time to start thinking about your communication protocols and how we are communicating and making information available to students, parents, and guardians. and start setting up those norms and procedures from the beginning. So if it's a PDF or if it's an email, then let them know this is how they can access you as well. One thing that is important to note, if multiple students are using the same device at home to access SeeSaw, I don't know if this is a situation you have where siblings are using the same device and they're signing in and out. They do need to actually sign in and out for each use. So they'll end up, if they don't sign out of SeeSaw and then the sibling comes in and opens Chrome and opens SeeSaw, it'll log in to their brother or sister's account. So we need to make sure that those students know they have to sign in and out for each use. An easy workaround is you could have those students use different browsers, meaning that you could have one student using Google Chrome and Joey uses Google Chrome every time he signs into SeeSaw, and Susie uses Mozilla Firefox. So they're using different browsers, and they always use the same browser so they can stay signed in. Just ease of access. So that's one way. You could also, oh, beautiful. So April says, actually send a paper copy of a PDF so they could print them and they could scan the QR code each time. So that's a nice, easy access thing. So they have a printed version with the QR code somewhere in their workspace, and then they could scan it each time for easy sign in. I like that idea a lot, especially for younger learners. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into our second objective, which is creating a remote learning plan. There are three considerations when creating your learning plan. The first one is how many activities will you assign? Remember, our young students have a low attention span, or the time that they're going to spend on one activity is lower. So how can we incorporate brain breaks and physical offline activities into our routine? So I'm actually going to add a link into our chat box here. And I'm going to have you take a minute, and I'd like you to actually scroll through and find one activity that you would assign that contributes to building this holistic routine for home-based learning. And when I say holistic, I mean we're actually including brain breaks and we're including physical offline activities into our routine for students. And I will say, SeeSaw has done a fabulous job of making just a wonderful library of curated materials and activities available to teachers. I'm just such a fan. They have so many great things available, and they developed so much content around remote learning specifically. So I have to give them kudos for that. So when you are ready, go ahead and somebody can just unmute themselves and let me know which activity you've chosen to add to your routine and why. Has anybody found a good one that you would like to share with us why you've chosen that one?
There's one that we assigned last year that was called a rainbow scavenger hunt, and the students had to go find something red, something yellow, something green, and then as they completed the scavenger hunt, they would put the items they found together, take a picture, and then submit their work.
Excellent. I love that. And that actually goes with one of the other conventions of how we're going to build out these remote learning plans. And that is incorporating their home environment into the learning and really making learning tangible by using some of the physical objects available to them. Anyone else have one of these routines that they would incorporate?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I found one called Build a Masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
And it gave him kind of a list, like you have to go build something that's this tall, that has a triangle, it has a purple hat, it has something orange on the bottom. It gave him this whole list. So that'd be a fun little brain break you could do. Yeah, there it is. Fun little brain break you could do, you know, give them, when you need a break between subjects or something, give them 10 minutes and then see who came up with the most points.
Yes, I love that. And I could see that happening at home with my child. You know, I could see him running around and coming up with the different things and trying to find, you know, the corresponding shapes or the colors. And I could see that being something that students would really grasp onto, especially if you gamify it like that, who has the most points at the end.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. Anyone else? Daily independent reading routine, definitely. I don't know if that was one of the activities here, but I think adding in some of that, you know, like we were saying, SeeSaw gives you the opportunity to build in those routines, build in those schedules that, you know, may not be academic per se, but are really important to building their kind of healthy balance of how they're managing this remote learning. Exactly.
I had one where, this was unique to this group of children maybe, but the open-ended questions, and then they could choose video recording or the drawing tool to send their response. But if I posted it on the blog for them, the only way I could pull a lot of these kids into some of the break activities to do something directed was if they were going to get to share it with each other. Mm-hmm. And that brought the attention to them a little bit, and they got to feel noticed by each other a little more that way. That was even more effective than class Zooms sometimes for this particular group. But if I said, go out in your own space and do this, most of them weren't going to do that. They were going to go back to their video games or go do something else. And so I needed to structure it in a way that we would be sharing it with each other. And that was one way.
That is such a poignant comment and such a great solution. And I will say one of the things with SeeSaw, and especially if we're not showing students each other's work, leveraging that blog space or even feedback posting to all students, some way where we can tap into the social learning environment to, like you said, add that element of students being able to see each other's work really brings up the likelihood that they're going to engage in an activity if they're not getting graded for it, for example, or if it isn't part of the academic requirements, for example. So I love that you're thinking about adapting these kinds of activities to really motivate students to get them into it or to actually inspire them to participate in this kind of activity. And I think you hit the nail on the head. That's a beautiful solution of just having them post it on the blog or take a video of themselves doing it, or even reflect with audio so they can talk to each other and see what each other did with it. And it can be really silly and fun and cute, but that's part of building that class community. I love that, thank you. I did want to give a couple other resources and tools in here that you might incorporate for brain breaks. These are ones that we use quite frequently. You probably are already aware of them, but I just thought it would be good to add them in here. And you could easily add them as links to brain break activities. So Go Noodle, they're generally really quick little social emotional learning dances, or just quick kind of raps or different activities, but they're very physical, and they're generally very short, 3 to 5 minutes. And Cosmic Kids has a whole series of Cosmic Kids yoga, but they've done just a fabulous job of putting the yoga moves into stories. So if you haven't done it before, you can do things like Minecraft yoga, or my son really likes the Star Wars yoga and the Pokemon yoga where the different Pokemons are coming at them. So that might be sort of a longer PE activity or a Friday afternoon activity, but it's incredible how engaging it is, and they're really legitimate yoga poses. So, you know, it's great. You can't beat that. Okay. So the other thing to consider when we're building a remote learning plan is, how are you giving feedback and how often? And I know one teacher was saying, I think it was, I don't know if it was Katrina or Sophia, we were chatting at the beginning about struggling to give individual student comments versus whole group student comments. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to demo this very well because I only have one student in my class. But I did want to kind of open it up to the group and discuss, how are you providing feedback to students, and how often are you providing feedback to students in SeeSaw? So you can unmute yourself or add in the chat. Nobody's providing feedback? I know you are. By audio or comments, yes. Good, so multiple times a day by audio or comments. Good, so there are a few things that we can do to provide students feedback. Add a comment just before approving work, audio mostly. I commented on every activity they turned in, but I never knew if they saw it. Some did, and some didn't seem to ever. Interesting. And that's true. If they're not looking for it, they may not find those feedbacks. But we can do, we can post messages to the entire class. So I don't know if you're using this feature, post student work, and then you can record a video of yourself. But this is a nice way. I'm not going to do it. Let's do a little drawing. And I don't have a touchpad, so this is mouse activity. Then you have the option to post to individual students. And I told you I'm not going to be able to do it very well, but if you want to have comments go to small groups of students, you could use this feature. Does that make sense to everyone? Or you could do this as an announcement or a comment to the whole class, or if you have general feedback, or you want to post or maybe call attention to the comments that you don't think your students are seeing, you could post something to all students, a video of you actually clicking and seeing where that feedback is posted. So maybe the video is more of, remember students, I have spent time, you know, providing feedback. You wouldn't say it like that, but I have gone through each of your responses and I've added video responses. Make sure you check them out by clicking this and this and this, and then show me that you have found it by hitting respond. So you might do that early on to actually scaffold that skill of finding comments or finding feedback or responses. Excellent. So Maria says, written comment on individual posts, often before approving the post, to keep a dialogue going until understanding is met. Absolutely. So this is a great point that it's a good idea if you want them to make changes or if you're going to help them work through a process, not approving the post so we can keep it open for students to continue building and continue working on it. Thank you, Maria. So quick question to everyone, and I was going to have us actually do it as an activity, but I see our time is going quickly. When might you use this video message to post to all students? So beyond just general feedback, when could we also powerfully use this video message to post to all students or groups of students?
Hi, Allison. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, April.
I have a question because I switched to posting videos for my daily readings. I was reading the chapter book, and so I would start to post them here. With the younger students, they were quick to skip over this section. They just wanted to go into the assignments and clear off their assignments even after teaching them to go through their journal. How do you avoid having it get lost in the feed? Because often there are a lot of journal posts.
That's a great question. And they are just more drawn to responding to the activities in the journal posts.
Yeah, I was more successful when I made it an assignment because they wanted to clear it off. But even after explaining that they're going to be in the journal now, and I wanted to get the whole class to respond in there, it was hard for the younger students.
I would maybe reserve the post to all students. So maybe doing your daily reading or your weekly reading as an assignment, if that's where they're more apt to actually check it and respond to it perhaps. And then use the posts or the video comments or the announcements in a way that is more, I would say, high stakes. So they don't have an option, like they have to check there in order to unlock something or in order to find the clue for the week. You have to listen to the post at the beginning of the week in order to answer the question at the end of the week. So add in some of that, those motivators, intrinsic motivators into that space, so they're actually motivated to check it out. But I totally understand why especially younger students just want to kind of check those things off because it feels more actionable than just watching a video. So I actually have an action that I need to do. So perhaps if you fold in some kind of activity that is going to play out through those posts, they might be more apt to check it out. That's just off the top of my head. Does anyone else have any thoughts? April, I saw you unmuted. You wanted to respond?
Oh no, I was very detailed on how I would do things, but when the kids weren't supervised by an adult, they would just, even no matter how clear I laid something out, they would just go right into assignment and wouldn't even read directions. And I spent more time trying to correct it than I just felt it wasn't as successful as I would have hoped for when students weren't monitored by a parent or an adult.
So yeah, does anyone else have any thoughts on how we can kind of enhance or up the stakes on some of these tools so we can build in, I guess, sorry, I have a kid in the background, build in some of these routines from the beginning that they're going to sort of follow easier or get more in the habit of from this year, and try and break some of the bad habits potentially from last semester? Any ideas? Well, let's come back and think about that. And I like that you are thinking about that anyway, but I want to offer you some more concrete options. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Beginning of the week, and let them know what is happening during the current week. This is for parents and students. Right, absolutely. I emailed parents when there were a lot of either unfinished and returned assignments. Yeah, and Cindy, that's kind of where my mind was going to about involving the families in the process as well, and depending on the age group of students. But if you're finding that that's a trend, it might be a great idea to involve the families, to really get them access. And there are ways to do that. Like SeeSaw has really built in the family app for families to support their students. So lean on that a little bit in order to kind of close the loop. And if you're finding that they're not, So Zooming live and teaching live will allow us to speak to students and tell them in person via Zoom how to change, fix, finish something. We'll be speaking with them multiple times a day so we can check in with them about assignments as well as teach. Yeah. And you could also use that Zoom session to go through some of that material. So you're actually doing it by them. So that would be, you know, the traditional equivalent of, we're going to work on this together as a group, and I'm going to monitor by walking around the class. So everyone put yourself on mute, open your SeeSaw tab, check that video, and now I'm going to ask you some open-ended or some guided questions to check that you've actually interacted with that material. Yeah, so Mary says, pulling families in was difficult. Most of my students were on their own with only occasional parent check-ins, if that. It's a hard time. It's a hard time for parents. It's a hard time for families. It's a hard time for everyone. And, you know, I believe everyone does the best they can. So hopefully we can engage parents, but also being mindful of the kind of smallest nuggets or chunks that we can pull parents into, meaning if you are going to spend 5 minutes a day with your child, or if you're going to spend 10 minutes a day, or if you're going to spend 30 minutes a day, these are the top 3, top 4, top 5 things that you can do to support your child. I think really having a purposeful plan for family engagement and interaction is really valuable. Absolutely. Okay, Cindy has a question about Screencastify. I found it helpful for longer lessons. So Screencastify, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a free add-on or extension to your Google Chrome, and it allows you to create screencast videos. So you can actually show or do a video that's showing what you are doing on the screen. So if you're having a hard time describing to students or just using static visual cues, Screencastify is a great option to actually show them, click here, respond here, and do this, and then post it into your SeeSaw activity. Yes, very cool tool, absolutely. And for those of you who are getting Mimeo View and Swivel as well, we're going to look at how to create those instructional videos that you'll be able to post to your SeeSaw as well. So Screencastify is a very specific type of instructional video. It's your screencast. So follow me on what I'm doing on the screen. We're going to look at creating live videos and process videos. So if you're actually doing something. Okay, I'm going to kind of speed it up because we only have 7 minutes, and then we're getting on to the next one. But I did want to talk just a little bit about including family members, which I think we've already kind of covered. Include tangible physical objects in your learning routines, and leverage time and choice. So make use of all those things that we have available to us in home learning environments. Okay, so really quick, I want to talk about SeeSaw and Google. And as I mentioned at the beginning, many of the original purposes for integrating Google into SeeSaw, some of the glaringly obvious ones, SeeSaw has actually rectified with their latest updates. So one of the biggest ones that always bothered me in SeeSaw is we couldn't have students work on a multi-page assignment. So if I want them to think about a chapter book, or not a chapter book, but writing a series or illustrating a book or illustrating something that was continuous or worked in a continuous template, that wasn't available to us. So in that case, I would have said, integrate your Google Slides, because then they have the option to build on multiple pages. Now, SeeSaw has updated and made multi-page options. So if you're building a template for your students to reply, you can actually add multiple pages. Okay, so I'm not going to get into each one, but you know how to build a template, and then you just at the bottom have the option to add multiple pages. And that gives them the option when they're responding to add a page. Let's see, I don't want to spend the time doing it. Okay, the other thing that we might consider integrating Google is when you're creating an activity, you can always add from your Google Drive. So that's a really easy option. If you're finding that creating content or creating material in SeeSaw, for example, building your templates or building your design in SeeSaw is just not as rich as you want it to be, I would suggest starting in Google, either Google Docs or Google Slides, and then uploading it by syncing or connecting your Google Drive account here. You can also add a link. I thought one of the things that I would be able to show you was linking to an interactive or a collaborative Google Slides experience. So again, going back to, I believe it was Mary who was talking about students needing that social learning to be able to either work together or see what each other has done. That's one of the downfalls of SeeSaw, I think. It's a highly independent, individualized platform. So if we can build in or fold in some of the collaborative features of Google, there are good ways to do that. Linking is not the way, apparently. So actually, if we're going to link a Google Slides activity, we're going to do it through drawing. And I'll show you what that looks like, and I'll show you why. When I added a link, it actually just brought up the first page of the Google Slides presentation. So not too sure, I'll have to play around with that one a little bit more, but it didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. So this is the first one that I've done. This is a Google HyperDoc that I created, or actually I found it, it's not mine, in Google Docs. And what I did was published to the web. And in the next session, I'm going to show you how to do that. And the purpose for that, when you open this in SeeSaw, students can view the original, and then it will open properly as a HyperDoc. But you could also publish to the web and have it as a web page that works as a HyperDoc as well. Essentially what we want, essentially what we want is for students to be able to access all the links, and then on their side, we want them to be able to respond using the SeeSaw features. So I want them to respond here using draw or text. I want them to create a video here. I want them to respond with text here. And you could come in and modify this to make it more SeeSaw appropriate. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Oh my gosh, an hour is just not enough. That's always my problem. So here's some of the things. So I added in SeeSaw icons down here so they can choose one of the tools and then write a little letter in notes. So as long as you have it on the assignment side, that students can view the actual HyperDoc, meaning they can see the links, they can click on everything. But on the student side, they're able to actually complete the activities in SeeSaw. That's the integration there. And I see that a few of you have been working with this already, because I looked through the school library and there were some great activities in there that leveraged the Google Slides. Here, let me find one. Choice boards. This was another example of using HyperDoc in a Google Slides, and these are all links. And then students would be able to respond however they want in SeeSaw. Okay, and the last one I wanted to show you is, so this is what I was talking about. I added it as a drawing, but the drawing has a link on it. So I created it in drawings, but then I added a link. And the purpose for that is I want students to actually all work collaboratively in the same Google Doc. So I could use this at the beginning of the week, for example, and we could do it every week and then come back and review what people filled in every week. But this would be a nice routine that you could build in. So we have a question of the week, and each one of these slides would have your student name on it. So they would know every time I come back and access this Google Doc or Google Slides, I'm always going to fill in slide number 8. And then at the end of the week, when you do your synchronous lesson, you can actually present this and we can talk about it as a around the room or think aloud, share aloud type thing. All right, our time is up and our meeting is going to start in the other session. But I did want to explain just one more time, the reason that I switched this session to today is because our next hour is going to really build on some of the things that we can do with our Google applications, and then you can build those in or apply them in SeeSaw. So I think it'll be a really nice complement to this session. Within Google Slides was cutting off a video early. Also, only a certain number of students could access a video in the drive before it maxed out. then they would have to wait hours until it reset. Do you know if there are updates to the integration? Perhaps a better question for the next session. Yes, Maria, I'm finding that the integration is pretty low level. And it just, I would assume they're going to continue updating it, but keep checking back. And if you're finding issues with the like timing of things, send feedback. So if there are specific things that are coming up and up again, I will say SeeSaw, Google, they are being extremely responsive to teacher feedback at the time. So if it's something that you expect a lot of teachers are running into, send feedback. All right, folks, I'm going to stop this meeting so we can, hopefully you're all going to come over to our next hour, our next meeting, and I'll see you all over there. Thank you.